Welcome back to True Crime Documentary YouTube channel. How well do we really know the people we trust? That was the haunting question hanging over the quiet town of Crestwood, Connecticut, on a crisp September morning in 2022. The town had always been a picture of tranquility. Rows of neat houses with white picket fences, children playing in the park, and neighbors chatting over coffee. But everything changed that autumn morning when the body of 17-year-old Emily Parker was discovered in the woods behind her family's home. It was a discovery that shook the entire community. Emily Parker, a 17-year-old girl, had been found by a jogger, her body hidden beneath a pile of leaves and branches in the woods behind her family's home. The gruesome nature of her death shocked everyone. Crestwood wasn't the kind of place where things like this happened. It was a town where people trusted one another, where families felt safe, and where the idea of a brutal murder seemed almost impossible. But now, that illusion of safety had been shattered. Who would kill Emily Parker? That was the question everyone was asking. Emily was a bright, promising young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She was well-liked, talented, and ambitious, with dreams of studying journalism in New York. She loved art, literature, and photography, and she was often seen wandering the woods behind her home, capturing the beauty of nature with her camera. But now, those woods had become the site of her tragic and untimely death. Detective John Rivers, a seasoned investigator from the Hartford Police Department, was called in to handle the case. Rivers had worked on difficult cases before, but there was something about this one that felt different. From the moment he arrived at the scene, he sensed that this was not a random act of violence. The way Emily's body had been concealed, the brutality of the attack, the signs of a struggle, all of it pointed to someone who knew her well, someone who had a personal connection to her. As Rivers began his investigation, he quickly turned his attention to Emily's family. The first 48 hours of any investigation are crucial, and Rivers knew that the answers to Emily's murder might lie within the walls of her own home. Emily lived with her mother, Julia Parker, and her stepfather, David Parker. On the surface, they appeared to be a typical suburban family. David was a successful financial advisor, respected in the community, and Julia was a dedicated homemaker. But as Rivers delved deeper into their lives, he began to uncover cracks in the family's seemingly perfect facade. Emily's relationship with her mother had been strained in recent years. Julia had raised Emily as a single mother until she married David when Emily was 12. At first, Emily had been excited about having a new father figure in her life, but as she entered her teenage years, tensions began to rise. Friends of the family described frequent arguments between Emily and Julia, often about Emily's independence and Julia's new priorities. Emily felt that her mother was more focused on her new marriage than on her, and their once close relationship had become distant and fraught with conflict. But it wasn't just Julia that Emily had grown distant from. David, too, had become a source of discomfort for Emily. In the months leading up to her death, Emily had confided in her best friend Lauren that she didn't trust her stepfather. There was something about him that made her uneasy, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Lauren had brushed it off at the time, thinking it was just typical teenage anxiety, but after Emily's death, those comments took on a far more sinister meaning. As Rivers continued his investigation, Julia quickly became the prime suspect. Her alibi for the night of Emily's murder was weak. She claimed she had been at home, alone, watching television, but no one could corroborate her story. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Parker household the night before Emily disappeared, and one neighbor claimed to have seen Julia outside late at night, pacing back and forth. There was also the matter of Julia and Emily's relationship, which had been growing increasingly tense in the months leading up to Emily's death. Some even speculated that Julia had grown jealous of Emily's youth and beauty, and that years of resentment had finally boiled over into something far darker. As Rivers dug deeper, he uncovered troubling evidence that seemed to point to Julia. Phone records showed that Julia had made several late-night calls to David's office in the days leading up to Emily's death, but she denied having any memory of making those calls. Her behavior during interviews was also suspicious. She was emotional and distraught over Emily's death, but there was something off about her reactions. She seemed defensive, evasive, and at times almost cold. Rivers couldn't shake the feeling that Julia knew more than she was letting on. But despite the growing suspicion around Julia, Rivers's gut told him that something didn't quite add up. There was another figure in Emily's life that had been quietly hovering in the background, her stepfather, David. On the surface, David appeared to be the perfect husband and stepfather. He was well respected in the community, known for his charm and generosity. He had an alibi for the night of Emily's murder, claiming he had been working late at his office, and security footage from his office building seemed to confirm his story. But Rivers had been doing this long enough to know when something was too perfect. As Rivers began to dig into David's life, he uncovered a web of secrets that turned the entire investigation on its head. It turned out that David Parker wasn't the perfect family man that everyone thought he was. For over a year, David had been having an affair with Rachel Martinez, the wife of their next-door neighbor. The affair had been intense, passionate, and carefully hidden. David had gone to great lengths to keep his relationship with Rachel a secret, and for a while he had managed to maintain his double life. But there was one problem. Emily had found out. In the weeks leading up to her death, Emily had begun to suspect that something wasn't right with her stepfather. She had noticed the furtive glances between him and Rachel, the whispered phone calls, the sudden absences that he couldn't explain. One night, Emily followed David and saw him meeting Rachel in secret. She had written about it in her diary, the same diary that Lauren had later handed over to Rivers. Emily had been conflicted. She wasn't sure what to do with the information she had uncovered. Should she tell her mother? Should she confront David? The weight of the secret was too much for her to bear, and it had begun to take a toll on her. Her schoolwork had suffered. Her artwork had become darker, and she had grown more withdrawn from her friends and family. The secret was eating away at her, and in the end, it cost her her life. David had realized that Emily knew about the affair, and he knew that if she told Julia, his life would be destroyed. Everything he had worked for, his marriage, his career, his reputation, would come crashing down. So on the night of Emily's murder, David followed her into the woods. He confronted her, and when she threatened to tell Julia everything, he snapped. In a fit of panic and rage, he killed her. But David wasn't finished. After killing Emily, he went back to his office to establish his alibi. He made sure he was seen on the security cameras, and he even planted evidence to make it look like Julia was involved. He knew the tension between Julia and Emily would make Julia an easy target, and for a while, it worked. The police were focused on Julia, and David thought he had gotten away with murder. But Rivers wasn't fooled. His instincts told him that something wasn't right, and as he dug deeper into David's life, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The final breakthrough came when Rivers re-examined the forensic evidence. Fibers found on Emily's clothing matched a suit that David had worn on the night of the murder, and phone records showed that Emily had called David's office in the days leading up to her death. When Rivers confronted David with the evidence, the man's calm, controlled facade began to crack. At first, David denied everything, but under the pressure of the mounting evidence, he finally broke down and confessed. He admitted to killing Emily, claiming it had been a moment of blind panic, that he had never meant for it to happen. But his tears and excuses couldn't undo the fact that he had taken the life of an innocent girl to protect his own selfish desires. David Parker was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The man who had once been a pillar of the community was now exposed as a cold-blooded killer. The town of Crestwood was left in shock. How could someone they had trusted, someone they had admired, be capable of such a horrific act? For Julia, the nightmare didn't end with David's arrest. She had lost her daughter, been falsely accused of her murder, and now had to come to terms with the fact that the man she had loved had destroyed her family. The emotional scars from that trauma would take years to heal. As for Crestwood, the town would never be the same. The murder of Emily Parker had exposed the darkness lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect community, a reminder that even in the most idyllic places, danger can be hiding right next door. Emily Parker's death serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered and how deadly secrets can become when they're forced into the light. In the end, it wasn't just Emily's life that was destroyed by David's lies. It was an entire family, an entire community, left to pick up the pieces. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out our other videos for more captivating stories. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.